In 2018, Concordia professor Shimon Amir was honored with the university's highest form of recognition for overall research achievements by being recognized as a distinguished university research professor. As director of the Center for Studies in Behavioral Neurobiology and honorary Concordia University Research Chair in Psychology, today we join Lauren Segall, a former student of Amir's and also the advisor of research and development at the Gina Cody School of Engineering. And she sits down with Amir to talk about his illustrious career. Conversation is introduced by Paula Wood-Adams, the Interim Vice-President of Research and Graduate Studies. Thanks for listening. We would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kiyunkahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. And Chichage, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. And today it is a home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. And we respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community.
My name is Paula Wood-Adams, and I'm the Interim Vice-President for Research and Graduate Studies here at Concordia. With research excellence a hallmark at Concordia, it's no surprise that our faculty members are among the most celebrated researchers in their fields. From new discoveries to the continued expansion of knowledge in existing areas, our researchers are known locally, nationally, and internationally for their work. And while there are various research awards and accolades at Concordia, the title of Distinguished University Research Professor is unique. This annual distinction is Concordia's most prestigious form of recognition for overall research achievements. It recognizes faculty who have demonstrated outstanding and sustained distinction in research over the course of their careers. They must be recognized nationally and internationally for both impact and leadership. Since the award began in 2018, only 8 researchers have been awarded this milestone title. Shimon Amir, a professor and honorary Concordia University Research Chair in Psychology, was one of the first 2 recipients of this honor. His list of achievements is lengthy, and today we will hear him discuss his outstanding career and notable research with Lauren Segall. She's a former student of Shimon's and is the current advisor for research development at the Gina Cody School of Engineering. At this point, I'd like to pass the baton over to Lauren and Shimon.
Thank you, Paula. Hi, Shimmy.
Hi, Lauren.
Thank you for asking me to be your interviewer, and it's an honor, and it was such a pleasure to be a student in your lab, and it was my great good fortune to end up in your lab. As you know, it was a bit of an accident, and I think I probably stayed there for about 2 years longer than I should have because I just didn't want to leave. So it's hard to know where to start when you have such a long and illustrious career, such as you do. But I thought I would take you and the listeners and viewers on a bit of a journey over the course of the events and decisions and landmark discoveries that set you on the path to where we are right now. So without further ado, you did your PhD at McGill and your postdoc at Concordia.
Yes.
In neuroscience, and you had early success primarily in the field of addiction, where you were looking at opioid use and alcohol. And then people probably don't know this about you, but
welcome.
then you went and
Hello and welcome to
did
the episode
clinical
of
psychology and were a practicing clinician for several years before coming back to Montreal.
To the next episode of the Full
Part-time,
Space Checking In series.
Before coming
We
back
meet up
to
with
Montreal
Patrick
to
Latini,
accept a tenure
Concordia's
track
public
position in
affairs
the newly
advisor,
established
to listen
Center
in
for
on his
Studies in
conversations
Behavioral
with Concordia
Neurobiology, or the
researchers.
CSBN.
This week,
So
he sits
the
down
first
with
question
Concordia
is,
researcher Stephanie
why
Duguay
research?
and one of her
Why did you
co-authors,
go into
Christopher
research?
Dietzel,
Why
to discuss their new
neuroscience?
study
And then why did you
in the
come
Journal
back
of
to
New Media and Society,
So research,
looking at how dating apps like
I think
Tinder,
it was
Bumble, and
all because I had
Match.com
a
were quick
great
to adapt
mentor
to the new
for
limits
my
placed on
master's,
socializing during the pandemic,
studies
and how connections,
in Tel Aviv
relationships,
University.
and authenticity
Professor Shimon
became
Amir,
prized
who
over instant
also
chemistry
is a
and mutual
former
sexual attraction.
faculty member at
Thanks for
Concordia. We happened to meet
Hello
in
and
Tel
welcome to the
Aviv
next
while I
episode
was
of the
starting
Fourth
my
Space
master's
Checking-In series,
in clinical
where
psychology.
we meet up with Patrick Latany,
And he
Concordia's
really
public affairs
seduced me
advisor,
into
to listen
doing
in
research.
to his conversations with Concordia
and
researchers.
The rest is history.
This week,
I
he
got
sits down with
caught
Concordia
by
researcher
his
Stephanie
passion
Dugan
for
and one of her co-authors,
science,
Christopher
for
Dietzel,
research,
to
and
discuss
for
their new
discovery
study,
and the
published in the
process
Journal of
discovery.
New Media and Society,
And it took
looking at how
me
dating apps,
in a storm,
such as Tinder,
and this
Bumble,
is,
and
I guess,
Match.com,
when it
were quick
all
to adapt to the
began.
new limits
Because as
placed
an
on
undergraduate
socializing
student, I
during the
wasn't
pandemic.
that interested in
Thanks for listening.
research. I was more inclined to do clinical work, but Zalman, as a clinician and a researcher, showed me the way. And this is when it happened, when it started. And that's what I've been doing now for the last, I would say, 50 years.
Why Montreal? Because you seem to come back to Montreal. What was the neuroscience research landscape in Montreal?
Well, the first time I came to Montreal
and welcome to the Fourth
was
Space
because
podcast. This
Zalman,
is the first episode of our new series celebrating Concordia's distinguished university research professors,
suggested
the highest
that I'll go to
form of
McGill
recognition
to do
for
a PhD
overall research achievement.
under
In
his
this episode,
mentor,
Professor
Dr.
Shimon Amir
Stern.
sits down
I went
with Lauren
back to
Segall,
Israel for
his
8
former
years,
student and the
worked
current
at the
advisor
Weizmann
of
Institute,
Research and
and
Development
after
at the
8
Gina Cody
years,
School
I,
of Engineering.
for various reasons,
Conversation
moved
was
back
introduced
to
by Paula
Montreal
Wood-Adams,
and
the
got
Interim
this position
Vice-President,
at Concordia, and that was
the Interim
in
Vice-President of Research and Graduate
1987.
Studies.
So I've been at Concordia now
Thanks for
for
listening.
nearly 35 years.
And was there innovative work going on? You were surrounded by a group of researchers and the CSBN
Hello and welcome to the Fourth
doing
Space
interesting
podcast.
work. Montreal was
This
a
is the
rich
first
landscape
episode of
for
our new series
collaboration as well.
celebrating Concordia's
Right.
distinguished
It was a
university
really
research
exciting
professors,
time, and
the highest
and,
form of
this
recognition
was
for overall
kind of the
research
beginning
achievement.
of
And in this episode,
CSBN.
Professor
There were
Shimon
only
Amir
4
sits down with Lauren Segall,
members
his
of
former
CSBN. When I
student
joined,
and the current
I became
advisor
the 5th member.
of Research and
Zalman
Development
Amir,
at the
Peter
Gina Cody
Shizgal,
School of Engineering.
Jane Stewart, and Roy Wise.
The conversation
I
is
was
introduced
the
by
5th
Paula
one
Wood-Adams,
to join
Interim
CSBN,
Vice-President
and
of Research
it was,
and Graduate Studies.
an honor and
Thanks for
very
listening.
exciting to me. And that's kind of started my career at Concordia.
Before we go any further,
Hello and welcome to the Fourth Space podcast.
You are a world-renowned,
This is the first episode of our new
internationally
series
researcher
celebrating
in the field
Concordia's
of circadian
distinguished
biology.
university research
So before we go
professors,
any further, can
the
you just
highest
give a
form of
brief
recognition
description or
for overall research
explanation
achievement.
for those listening who are not
In this
familiar with
episode,
the concept,
Professor
what
Shimon
circadian
Amir
rhythms are
sits
and
down
why
with
they're
Lauren Segall,
important?
his former student,
So
and the
circadian
current
rhythms
advisor
are those
of Research and Development at the
daily
Gina Cody School of
oscillations or
The conversation
fluctuations
introduced by
in
Paula
a
Wood-Adams,
host of
Interim Vice-President,
physiological,
Interim
metabolic,
Vice-President
and
of Research
behavioral
and Graduate Studies.
processes
Thanks for listening.
that enable animals to, or humans, organisms, because circadian rhythms are found
Hello
in
and
all
welcome to the
levels
Fourth
of
Space
biology,
podcast.
allow
This is the first
organisms
episode
to
of our
adjust
new
well
series
to
celebrating
their
Concordia's
external
distinguished
environment,
university research
primarily
professors,
to the
the
solar
highest form
cycle.
of
And
recognition
so
for
those are
overall
the
research
rhythms.
achievement.
This is what we can see
In this episode,
with our eyes or measure in animals. And these rhythms are not a direct response to the environment, but
I should
rather
have something about
they're
who Shimon
driven
Amir is.
internally by
Isn't that in the
clocks
original?
that are called circadian
Blobbity-doo?
clocks. These clocks drive the rhythms, and they
Let's find
are
out.
synchronized
Sorry.
with the external environment, primarily via the light-dark cycle. They are crucial for normal adaptation of organisms to the environment.
And they're adaptive, and if they're disrupted,
So disruption of circadian rhythms lead to a host of disturbances and pathologies. So they're really, really fundamental to biological regulation and survival.
so the course of research is rarely a straight line. You're in circadian research now, but I remember when I was a student, just to
I could do the whole
paraphrase
intro.
you, and I think actually you were paraphrasing B.F. Skinner, but you said to me once that in the course of a line of inquiry, if something unexpected crops up, that you should drop the first line of inquiry and run in the direction of the unexpected discovery. So what was the discovery that pointed you towards circadian research? Because we saw you didn't start there. And what kept you running in that direction? What was the discovery?
That's kind of tough to pinpoint. There was something that kind of led me to focus on circadian biology, because prior to that, I kind of shifted. I moved from area to area because I was just seduced by science to the extent that I made a finding, I made a discovery, I published the results, and then all of a sudden I found something new and I kind of like got excited about that. And I think that the finding that got me going in a serious way in circadian rhythm it was kind of like almost unintended finding. It was a thought that circadian rhythms can be, well, we knew that circadian rhythms are synchronized with the environment via the light-dark cycle. But for whatever reason, I came up with the idea that instead of stimuli, events that are associated with light, with the light-dark cycle, can themselves entrain circadian rhythms. Stimuli that initially are not effective in entraining circadian rhythms, but as a result of an associative learning process, they become effective in synchronizing rhythms. That finding was published in a very good journal and got
Nature.
In Nature. Yeah. Allowed me to receive a major funding from CIHR to continue to study this phenomenon. Actually, this was, I think, just at the beginning when clock genes were discovered. Clock genes are the gears of the circadian clock that drive circadian rhythms. And this was at the time when clock genes were discovered. And so there was a lot of excitement in the area, in the field, about circadian rhythms. CIHR found this unusual finding that we had in the lab and funded my research. And it escalated from there to various aspects of chronobiology and circadian rhythms and the genes that drive them, etc.
So that was your 1996 Nature paper that really put you on the map and solidified your reputation also, because I know before you were also looking at thermogenesis and nitric oxide in the SCN as signaling. But
I mean, before that, I was very interested in thermogenesis, which is an adaptive response to cold and diet, heat production in a tissue called brown fat. And I was studying how this internal furnace of the body is responding to various external stimuli. We found that indeed the suprachiasmatic nucleus, it's a region of the brain that harbors the master circadian clock in mammals, that the suprachiasmatic nucleus had influences over this brown fat thermogenesis. So that was before I really moved to focusing on circadian rhythms per se.
Okay, so the Nature paper was really what sort of solidified you researching circadian rhythms. So subsequent to that, you were also one of the first to identify and characterize peripheral clocks within the brain.
Right.
And that was a really big thing.
Yeah.
Why is that so important? And what does it mean in terms of human pathology and human behavior?
Initially, following the discovery of clock genes, people in the field focused on clock gene expression in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is the region that I mentioned before that functions as the master clock that controls circadian rhythms. But once circadian clock genes were identified and shown to be critical for circadian rhythms, it became evident that these genes are expressed in all cells and tissues of the body, not only in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which functions as a clock, but also in many other brain regions and peripheral tissues like the liver, lung, heart, etc. Initially, people weren't sure about what is the function of these clock genes, but now it turns out that there are local clocks in different regions of the brain. I'm particularly interested in the function of clock genes in the brain. So in different regions of the brain that are important for motivation, emotion regulation, addiction, etc. Through studies that enable the genetic manipulation of clock genes within specific brain regions, it became evident that these clocks are very important for the maintenance of adaptive, normal behaviors and functions, and that in the absence of those clock genes or loss of function of these genes can lead to various perturbations in behavior and physiology. So it became very important to study the nature of these clock genes, how they are regulated, both by the master clock, because the master clock appears to control circadian rhythms in the entire organism by sending messages to those peripheral clocks. So yeah, that really attracted my attention, and we kind of moved from a suprachiasmatic nucleus-centric research to studying clock genes in different regions of the brain. And as you know, you were heavily involved in this research by discovering a very important role for stress hormones in the control of clock gene expression in stress-related brain regions.
I have just a last question for you. You've already mentioned that Zalman was your inspiration and mentor. So, I was going to ask that. I mean, aside from your many achievements and recognitions and accomplishments, you have an unbelievable training record. And the quality and quantity of students that you've had are just unparalleled. And did your training and your experience, how did that influence your approach to training and take on training?
So I think I had...
Because you were amazing, by the way.
I had 4 great mentors. Zalman to begin with, but Jane Stewart and Peter Schisgall and Roy Wise were also quite influential in my work, in the way I was thinking, in writing. I learned a lot from them. It was natural to pay forward, to make sure that students that come to work with me will get the best that I can give in terms of mentorship and resources, and that's the way it's done, and that's the way success is built on. I cannot do everything by myself. It all depends on mazel, luck, and good students and good collaborators, and that's what I think colors my career. I mean, the students, they're the ones who helped me get where I am today. I wouldn't be able to do that without students. First and foremost, I have to thank them for my accomplishments. Not only in terms of the work that they've done in the lab, but they taught me a lot too. I learned a lot from you, particularly. Well, Lauren became my students because we had an exchange in the cafeteria in the whole building downtown. And I challenged her, and she had the chutzpah to respond. And then I think the same day or a day later, I met her on the elevator and I offered her to come to the lab, and the rest is history, right? Is that the story?
You didn't say please or thank you.
Yeah, I know.
When I was working at JavaU.
Yeah.
I told you needed to say please or thank you. It could have gone both ways. I was very lucky that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we met. I always had your coffee ready, you and Jane. And then I was fortunate to end up in your lab.
And Lauren's papers, the work that she's done in the lab, I mean, they're very, very highly cited, by the way. I don't know if you know.
I haven't followed in a while, to be honest.
Very highly cited. So your work had huge impact, and people look at that work.
It was an exciting time.
Yeah.
And your passion for discovery.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's good and it's not so good, because that led me to jump initially from area to area and making contribution and move on. But my interest in chronobiology and circadian rhythms has stayed with me for quite a long time now. And this is where I'm going to stay, I think.
Good. Thank you for talking to us, Jimmy.
My pleasure.
If you have an idea for a podcast, please let us know. You can contact us by email at info.4@concordia.ca or find us on social media at CU Fourth Space. We'd love to hear from you. The Fourth Space podcast is hosted by me, Douglas Moffat, and produced with Anna Voklavek. Editing by Chanel Lees Marshall and Maximus Delmar. Social media and web support by Kari Valmstead. And our theme music, courtesy of Supercontinent. Thanks for listening.